So this question is giving you a bunch of statements and asking you to classify them as either qualitative or quantitative, and they ask you to give your reasons why. So let's define what are qualitative and quantitative statements. As you can see from my little chart here, qualitative statements are first statements that are subjective, meaning that they are opinion-based. So I can't really prove them. They're just based on what I think. And how you can know if something is subjective is whether it is measurable or not. So subjective statements are always unmeasurable, meaning that they are unable to be proven by a particular number. Now, you see I put in parentheses or measurements not given. So this is a kind of a special case. Um, so a statement that, so there are qualitative statements that you could see the components being able to be measured, but if the measurements aren't given, then it's still qualitative. So I'll give an example here. Let's say I scored more points in a basketball game than my friend did. Now, you could measure how many points I scored in that basketball game, and you could measure how many points he scored in that basketball game. You compare it to see whether it's true, right? But since the measurements aren't given, it is still a qualitative statement. So that's kind of a tricky, kind of special scenario there. So qualitative statements are basically either unmeasurable or the measurements just aren't given. Now we have quantitative statements, which is basically the exact opposite of qualitative. Um, so quantitative statements are not subjective, meaning they're not based on opinion. They're based on facts, based on numbers. And how you know whether it is not subjective is by if it's measurable. So a quantitative statement will be able to be proved by a particular measurement that is given within the statement itself. So they will say that statement, they will say that measurement that proves the statement is false or true. Okay, so yeah, these are some pretty confusing ideas, but they'll become more clear as we go through the questions themselves. So let's look at part A. The sun is approximately 93 million miles from Earth. Now, okay, so I'm going to use, when I write out the answer, I'm just going to put N for quantitative and S for qualitative, like subjective and not subjective. So this one would be quantitative because why? They give you a number that you can check and that you can use to prove that this statement is true. It's something that is very measurable, 93 million miles. And then let's look at part B, which says Leonardo da Vinci was a better painter than Michelangelo. Now, is this something that is measurable? Is there a way I can measure the artistic excellence of either one of these painters and compare them? No. This is something that is completely subjective. It's opinion based. I could think Michelangelo is better than Leonardo da Vinci. Another person could think that Leonardo da Vinci is better than Michelangelo. So this is what? A qualitative statement. As for subjective. And C, ice is less dense than water. Now, this is a tricky one. Now, this is the special scenario that I told you about earlier. Now, you might think that this is a quantitative statement because you can see that, I could measure the density of ice and then measure the density of water and then compare them and see that ice is indeed less dense than water. But since the measurements are not given, this is actually a qualitative statement. So this is subjective because there is no measurements given here, even though that these two things can be measured. Now we have part D, which is butter tastes better than margarine. So this is very similar to part B, and it is purely subjective and therefore qualitative because I can't really measure the taste of butter or margarine in any numerical way. So there's no way to clearly compare these things as greater than other. It's completely opinion based. So that's why it's qualitative. And let's look at this last one. E, a stitch in time saves 9. Now, is this something that can be measured? Is there even any measurements involved in this statement? No. There's a number involved. There's the number 9, but is it a number that results from measurement? No. So therefore, this is also a qualitative statement. So S for subjective.